live now. So I wanted to say thank you everybody for participating so far in our Spring 2021 conference. I hope everything is going amazing for you guys in committee. I hope you guys are all having really engaging debate and having a good time with your crisis updates and your committees. We are here in this breakout session with Dr. Holmsten, Dr. Stephanie Holmsten. I'm going to introduce myself and I'm going to introduce her. Hi, everybody. My name is Devika Kumar. I'm a senior here at UT Austin. I'm majoring in international relations, economics, and plan to honors. It's been an honor being a part of the CTMUN family, and I'm the USG of Conference Services as well. So really excited to be part of CTMUN. Hope you guys are all having a good time, and we have a ton of fun putting on this conference for you. And of course, we have with us Dr. Stephanie Holmsten here today. She's one of our esteemed IRG faculty members. She's also chair-elect of the Provost Teaching Fellows. She is a faculty lead for study abroad programs to both Chile and Panama. And she's co-director of the Brumley Next Generation Scholars Program, which is under the Strauss Center for International Security and Law. So Dr. Holmsten's super involved. We're really lucky to have her. She earned her master's in international relations from American University and her PhD in government from here, University of Texas at Austin. And her research focuses on the election of women, ethnic minorities, and minority women around the world and in electoral institutions. So Dr. Holmsten, thank you so much for being here today and for joining us. We're just going to have a really fun and valuable conversation for all the students here who are hopefully having a good time. But I wanted to ask you, how are you doing today?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Thanks so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here. I had a chance to pop into some of the sessions that you guys have been having throughout the day, and I have to just say hats off to you all, to all of the work, the students, for the work that you all have done. You inspire me. I just, again, you started at 8 o'clock this morning. It is a Saturday. I see you. I see what you are doing. You've spent time together working so hard today to solve some of the world's most complex historical problems coming out of the Cold War, but these are issues that have meaningful impacts really for today's pressing challenges. And you got together today to explore these regions of the world that you've read about, maybe you have traveled to, but clearly you have studied these issues really hard. And I was just so inspired with how you were finding solutions and engaging in diplomacy and preparing directives and outlining your positions and managing crisis alerts. It was really, really remarkable what you guys are doing. It's an inspiration.
Yeah, it is really awesome. It's super inspirational. I am always so impressed at how professional all the delegates are, and also how much fun is incorporated into these, like you said, really challenging issues, but also really just like fun to kind of be a part of that solution. And so I think the students are having a good time. And yeah, thank you so much for being that kind of real life role model for what it means to be partaking in international relations. So I think we're just going to jump right into it. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about like how you're doing and just kind of like what you're up to these days, how you keep up with the news and what kind of news that you're keeping up with, and what are you watching right now? What are your eyes on?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I know that these teams have been working on a lot of really important issues. And one thing that I've just been kind of really thinking about lately are questions about sort of inclusion. You all are debating and you're wrestling with things. And I'm just thinking a lot about sort of globally, who's at the table when we're wrestling with some of those things. So we know we follow the news, and for sure I try and get a balance, right? So I've got the Wall Street Journal on one hand and the New York Times in the other hand, try and grab some international news. So the Financial Times and the Economist are helpful. And obviously we're going to get a lot of the news from powerful countries, large economies. And so sometimes I try and listen a bit behind the scenes to some of the other voices that might not come out so clearly. And so for me, these are voices from low income or middle income countries, from emerging markets. And I'm thinking a lot these days about inclusion. So I'm really watching some of the events in Asia, the protests, for example, in Thailand or Myanmar, ways in which people are asking for a seat at the table. And what does that look like? What is that balance between sort of stability and the sort of messy part of decision making that includes people? We know in the Myanmar case, for example, the prime minister elected in 2015, she comes in with this Nobel Peace Prize, and then we watch under her administration violence against a Rohingya ethnic minority in her country, and then a coup in February and the takeover by the military, right? And so how do we think about who should be in those conversations, who's in those decision-making rooms? We know that ASEAN is going to meet and Thailand will play a role in trying to figure out what solutions look like. And Thailand has its own complicated history with a monarchy and a military and some elections from time to time. And so I'm watching what those protests look like. If you've seen any of the images from those protests, I wondered, Devika, could I share my screen?
Yeah, absolutely. If you can share some of those images now, feel free to.
All right, can you see these?
Let's see. We should be able to.
Well, maybe folks in the room have seen some of these images, right? Can you see that? If not, I will just stop sharing.
Give us one moment.
Y'all are working so hard. I love what y'all are doing.
Yeah, we can see it's a little bit cut off, so you're kind of going to be in the top left a little bit more. So you might want to scoot the window a little bit smaller and in the top left.
That made it better? Here, I've got an idea. How about I will put this in the chat. Will the chat connect with folks?
I think it would be best to screen share.
Okay, then I will try again to screen share.
Yeah, and just keep it kind of smaller and in the top left. And then I think that would be best. Perfect, yeah, that's great.
So looking at this picture, right, this is out of Myanmar. I love these stories about the role of art and images and the people that are telling their stories and making claims for peace and inclusion through that art. So here's an image from Myanmar. Maybe you recognize something in this picture, right? So for sure it's this picture of the dove, but it's also this three-finger salute. You see this here also in this other mosaic of defiance related images, art for freedom. What you see is this three-finger salute from the Hunger Games, right? So this has been some pop culture, young adult fiction around for probably over a decade at least. We can remember listening to it in the car on some road trip that we were in, right? One of those road trips when you're listening to the book and you're like, get back in the car, we're so excited to keep the story going, right? But here's the art picking up on that three-finger salute. Some of this imagery also includes some images of people not always a part of political contestation. So here's a woman, notice her hair is in this ponytail, and if you see the things that are in her hands, these are tools from the kitchen. These are household tools. And so I'm really interested in the ways in which, I'm going to stop sharing, people are picking up on some of the sort of everyday, some of the mundane to tell these stories through protest. So that's what I'm paying attention to.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. And like, as you said, as a researcher and academic, just keeping an eye on these kinds of things from like behind the scenes is so different than just being a consumer of like mainstream media. But that connection between like Hunger Games, like something we're used to and kind of something we grew up with, kind of like this symbol of like a revolution, is really interesting to see play out in real life. And especially with your research in the inclusion of minorities and ethnic minorities and women. So can you tell us a little bit about your research and how your research helps shape the way you see these events?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in a lot of ways, it is what brings me again back to this question of inclusion, right? Who is at the table? And certainly right now, during COVID, we see the ways that this really matters, right? So in this time of a global pandemic, due to good medical advice, we're encouraged to head home, to stay at home in order to prevent the spread of this disease. But what happens for people for whom their homes are not safe places? What if being home means that you can't work anymore? And so we're thinking about food insecurity. There's some data that suggests that we expect that the number of hungry people could possibly double due to the pandemic. So almost 10% of the world's population are hungry, and that is an increase over the past year of about 10 million people. That means people who can't sort of make it through the entire day without skipping a meal. And when you think about who skips a meal in the household, we know that when women traditionally play roles in the home that are different than other people in the home, women are more likely to skip a meal. So data out of Mexico and Lebanon and many other countries tell us that, in fact, where people are skipping meals, women are skipping more meals, more likely to go to bed hungry, to ensure that other people in the household get enough. So when we think about something like the global pandemic, it's very important to ask questions about other systems of marginalization within society. And when women are left out, then girls and women are more vulnerable in these times of crises. And we know that COVID is mattering as well for what jobs you hold. So can your job shelter in place? As a professor, thanks to Zoom, I can Zoom from my home. But what if I were cleaning rather than being a professor at UT? What if I was cleaning the buildings at UT, a crucial role for the university? These folks are going in every day. They can't shelter in place. They can't stay at home. And so these pandemics then have this impact through the lens of power, right? And so power and the way our society is organized really matters. And so we're thinking about whether women are at the table in decision-making places. And we find that, in fact, where women are at the table, for example, in conflict resolution, sometimes those resolutions then are more stable. We believe that the political deliberation, you've been a part of deliberating all day, that diverse team of deliberations actually gives us better outcomes. We think of them as politically more legitimate because more ideas were at the table. So the extent to which women are represented, we think we're going to get better outcomes, more legitimacy. And it makes us ask different questions then in research as well. So many folks at UN Women, for example, during COVID are tracking the rise in violence against women. So we're calling this a shadow pandemic, the ways in which when women are home and those homes are violent, women are seeing a remarkable rise in their own insecurity. So maybe we can ask interesting questions about security and how that impacts women differently than other genders. And so I care about women's representation, particularly politically. So we think that it matters within society. We know that it matters among jobs and business and household incomes, but we think it also matters if and when women can get elected. And here in the United States, where we're studying, right, we've elected our first woman of color to the VP position. This is an important gain for the United States, but also demonstrates how we're a bit far behind other countries in this regard. So more than 70 countries today have had a female prime minister or president, many of those really in the last few decades. So it's a new development that we're watching. And then we see how well women are represented in the legislature as well. So the United States globally is number 66 in terms of the election of women to the House and to the Senate. So 66 puts the United States right behind Egypt and El Salvador and Mali, right in front of Bulgaria and Afghanistan, right? So 27% of the House seats are held by women and 24% of the Senate are held by women, historic gains in 2018 and 2020. And so we watch these numbers because we think it makes a difference for how well legislation meets the needs of the community, and it also enhances legitimacy when we see people that look like us at the decision-making table. So it's important for all sorts of reasons, and the trends are positive, but we've got a lot of work to do.
That is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think it is really, first of all, it's really interesting to hear about how COVID kind of exacerbates some of these processes at like a household level, and then at a nation level, and then at the international level. So I think that we often think of like international affairs as being this really big, globally scaled, phenomenon where, you have countries, fighting over vaccines and things like that. But it's crazy to think about all these processes happening on a household decision-making level, what individually affects each woman, and the number of meals that they're getting every day. And so I think that really represents the variety and like the depth of this field, and your research as well. I think it's incredible, really surprising stuff, first of all, to hear about how the US is ranked amongst other countries when it comes to representation, but also kind of what it means for that inclusion and that representation on the impacts of that for citizens all around the world. I think it is such an interesting question, especially something I've also studied in the past as well. So it's really exciting to hear about your research and how you're going about that, and what it means. And it's just also insane to factor in all these crazy things. So like hunger and, protests and the legislation and, oh my God, COVID and climate change. And it's just, the scale is insane, but it's also the most like exciting thing about studying in this field. So I really appreciate you sharing in depth all of your research and, how you're contributing to this field in such an important way. So I think it's really inspiring to have somebody like you, especially as part of our faculty, because we get to see that representation in your research as well. And I personally really appreciate that as a woman studying international relations. And that kind of segues into how you came into studying international relations. So I know you've had a bit of a journey with both academia and also public policy as a practitioner of public policy. So would you want to tell us a little bit about how you personally came to become a professor here at the University of Texas at Austin, and what brought you to study, first of all, to get your PhD and to study international relations as a professor here?
Yeah, for sure. I love how you were thinking about those issues. You cued in, just real quick, I have to put a pin in this, to the household, right? And so just, little alert, right? Here comes some sort of feminist theory, some constructivist theory at you, right? Is that we think the household matters. And I'll make an argument for why it matters, right? The way that you and I treat the people closest to us becomes the building block of our society. And so while we might be tempted to study international relations from, of course, the White House and the House and the Senate and the cabinet and the decision-making powers, but how are those people making those decisions, and what norms and ideas are they standing on? We think a good way to understand what norms guide our behavior is to ask, how do individual people treat each other? What's going on in the household? And what is fascinating for us to think about is it means that what we do really matters, that how we treat each other really matters. So what you all engaged in all day long, this deliberation of listening to each other, of thinking about things from other perspectives, of practicing a particular way of being together, we think that that practice actually then creates this foundation for our society. And so if you want to figure out what the decisions are going to look like at the very top of the decision-making tree, you should in fact think about how everybody is making those decisions and those work their way up. It builds this society. It gives us our sense of oughtness. And so what we're doing really matters. Okay, there, I diverted slightly from your good question, but I just had to note that was a really nice piece. And it is true that while we think about the name recognition decision makers, we also want to think about the patterns throughout society. Okay, so how did I get here? So I studied political science in undergraduate. I had grown up in a community that sort of crossed the southern border of the United States. And so I had a sense that the laws, the things that shape how we do things are really going to matter, right? So if you've ever been sort of across a border back and forth, you know that things feel different when you cross that border. And yet here we are, just miles apart. We're still humans. We still engage in families and lifestyles and religion and all this sort of stuff. And yet you cross that border and life feels different. So I was like, something about the political system matters. So I decided to study political science. An undergraduate with a particular focus in development. So today this would be an IRG major for sure, right? So this is a major that thought about sociology and anthropology, as well as economics, as well as politics and history. So I was a pre-IRG major before there was such a thing, right? So political science. And like most political science majors, we look to Washington, D.C. as one place where a lot of really important decisions are made. And so I actually moved to Washington, D.C. Largely without a job. So I just sort of knocked on doors, and I did not ask, do you have a job? I asked, can I learn some more about your organization, please? And so people let me come in and learn. And I finally took an internship. So I worked for a year without pay for an organization that I really cared about, doing some great work around hunger and poverty around the world. That turned into a paid position. So I stayed there for 6 years. I love those years of working. I kept my eyes open. I said yes to a bunch of things. Yes, I'll take those folders to the Dirksen office building for that event. And I asked questions and tried to figure out what people were doing and how they got there and what degrees they had. And I finally decided that I wanted to start asking long-term questions. So policy is really oriented to the things that we can get done right now, which is really exciting. We move millions of dollars. We can make a huge impact in the lives of people in all sorts of places. But I found that I wanted to look at things over a long period of time. And I kind of didn't want to have to be constrained by whether it was politically possible. So I got my master's at American University. I put my toe in the water to figure out if academics was a comfortable place for me. I was out for 6 years. I didn't know if it would fit. So the master's helped me get used to it, loved it. And so came to Austin, to UT. And that's where then I really grew this interest in, again, other systems of marginalization. So I've been looking at sort of economic marginalization through questions about poverty and hunger. And then it felt natural to think about that as well in terms of identity. So gender and ethnicity. And so studying these electoral rules then brought me to IRG, where we can ask all these awesome questions about the complexity of the world around us. And we don't set anything aside. So we talk about the household and the decision makers and the economy behind it all, and immigration and religion and ethnicity. And so have just really loved teaching in IRG since then.
That's incredible. Thank you so much. And yeah, like I said earlier, you are one of our best and most loved faculty. I mean, all of our faculty is, but I wanted to go on the Chile study abroad with you. Unfortunately, got canceled because of COVID, but it was supposed to be a really exciting time. But yeah, it's really great to hear about kind of your journey and just something that I've learned personally throughout all of college and talking to so many different professors and so many different, graduate students and things is that this path is so nonlinear. There is a world of endless possibilities for you when you just have an interest in this area. And like you said, moving to DC without a job is something that is crazy to some people, but you have such an interest, you're willing to learn, you're eager to learn, and people recognize that. And so I'm really happy that you're here at UT now. And we are really lucky to have you here with us today. I think it's great to see that you can be kind of generally interested in IRG as a whole, and then you can really focus and find some passion within this really broad field and have a place where, your research becomes, like you said, those long-term questions and then those long-term solutions. So yeah, kind of you got the policy side, the academics, the academia side. So I was just wondering if you had a preference or I guess not even a preference, but which lessons you kind of got from either side. I think that's a question that a lot of people have these days.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I must admit, one through line for sure is curiosity, right? Just staying curious about the world around you. I mean, this is what you do in your work at UT. It's, my new favorite question, this is sort of alert for anybody doing any interviews for UT-based awards or programs. One of my favorite questions these days is, when was the last time you changed your mind? And I think sometimes we, of course, being an expert in a particular topic is really rewarding, and it's really important to understand the depths of a particular topic and to have a passion for something. I mean, obviously, I don't study the election of women and ethnic minorities and minority women because I don't care about the end result. Of course, I care about the end result. So passion matters. But I think a lot about this idea of when was the last time you changed your mind? Because I think it demonstrates learning. And I hope that we are always learning. And so whether in policy, and I would say in the policy world, the real learning edge for me was always that you have to be able to see things from other people's perspectives. So we were working, for example, on extending foreign aid to sub-Saharan Africa, particularly to fund small-scale farmers. So the feeling was that the global economy had largely bypassed small-scale farmers in sub-Saharan African countries. And we felt that the United States Agency for International Development could mobilize some new money to really invest in what mattered to families and households that earned their money largely through small-scale farming. Well, you can't go bursting into a member of Congress's office saying, hello, I need you to spend more money on foreign aid. You have to think first, what are the priorities driving this member? And can I find some common ground? And common ground, finding that common ground requires listening. So my guess is the activities that y'all have done today, you've been listening. How cool is that, right? You came in maybe with a position, some information at your hands, but then you listened and I saw a crisis alert come in, and I'm sure you had to sort of recalibrate things and you had to listen again, and maybe you created new coalitions after that crisis. But that listening is something that I hope we always hang on to, because I'm convinced that they tell us that the job market kind of changes every 5 years, right? So what are we preparing you for? Well, we're preparing you for jobs that aren't even there yet, right? So how do we handle the very nature of this constantly changing world? It's by always being curious, listening, and being willing to change your mind, because changing your mind shows that you learn something. So when I was in DC, the changing your mind was always like the puzzle of how can I get on the same page with somebody else? Somebody else maybe that's never walked in my shoes, somebody else that's maybe never thought about foreign aid in this way. How can I make an argument that says, let me partner with you where you are, and then let's move together to this place where we can both get something out of it. And obviously, hopefully as well, we could get some funding for small scale farmers. Academics is like that when we sort of say, how have other people studied this in the past, right? What do other people think matters when we ask questions about a global pandemic, right? Well, we can study Zika and Ebola and MERS and think about what happened then that might give us ideas for today, right? And so I might go in thinking I'm going to ask questions that relate to women and girls, but I also want to learn as I do that. And so really listening to the other person, hearing what is the conversation in the room, I think matters. And the other one that I'll end with is really the value of working in teams. Right? I know it's such a drag, right? You get into class and it's like, we're going to do this in groups, right? And you think, oh no, not group work, right? Who is excited about group work, right? It is so valuable to be able to work with other people. And I know this sounds like something out of our, textbook from kindergarten or something, but working well with others has been the most consistent tool that I have used no matter where I was. Because I think when we work well with others, we have opened ourselves to the possibility to learn from other people. New ideas are really good, and new ideas come when we're working with other people and when we're working in a team. I'm also finding in all these environments that I've worked in that the people that get like the cool initiative that comes across or gets to work in that really exciting team, it's the people that everybody else also enjoys working with. So be a good team member seems to also produce new opportunities that often lead to, promotions and other good things in your job. And so just finding a way to sort of be a good human being towards the people around you has some really good effects. You get exciting projects. You have a sort of curiosity about the world around you. And then I think in the end, it actually nets some really good job opportunities too.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, especially just kind of like generally broad wisdom for, people who are still deciding if they even want to go into an RG space. These are kind of skills that will apply no matter where you are. So I think that's incredibly helpful. I will give a quick note. So if you guys want to ask questions, the live chat is actually enabled now, but you do have to refresh your page. So please go ahead and do that. We do want to take some questions from you guys, and I'll be sure to get them from the YouTube stream. But you have to refresh your page in order to do that. So please drop some questions for Dr. Holmsten. So kind of going off of that, Dr. Holmsten, I just want to talk about what you're kind of hopeful about today. It definitely feels like, especially after the COVID pandemic, I think all of us can say that our lives are altered forever in not only our own personal lives and how we see our relationships and our work and our spaces and our relationships as well. But also, things like climate change and migration and, literally any number of issues and ethnic conflicts and, protests in other countries, democratization. Literally, it feels like, you read the news and there's kind of nothing to be hopeful about. So I know that studying international relations can kind of have your mind on these conflicts and all these like really seemingly impossible issues kind of all the time. So how do you retain that sense of hope and stay hopeful so that you know, have not only this sense of optimism for the future, but also this desire to keep studying this field? Because I know that it can get kind of overwhelming when you're constantly studying the news and, you know, the future just seems bleak sometimes. And we all feel a little bit isolated right now, but, you know, it's beautiful to see how we've adapted through Zoom and, you know, even virtual model UN. I never thought I'd be partaking in something like this, but just how do you find those kinds of moments of hope in your career and in your personal life as well?
Yeah, no, I'm going to ask you the same question. So I will answer, but then I want to hear you. So I must admit, I mean, I'm sorry, it's going to sound super cheesy, but this moment right here, right? So saying yes, you know, saying yes to, yeah, I'll spend some time this afternoon, you know, thinking about the world around me with young people that are inspired enough to study that. I think that's super exciting. I think that your studies, Devika, at the university, all of the CTMUN students that planned this day for us, I know that you have other things that you could be doing. I don't know if the high school students know how amazing this CTMUN group is, but you guys are producing incredible work. And you took all this extra time to plan this day so that we could be together. I know some of you on the CTMUN team are writing honors thesis papers. I don't know if all of the participants know, but we're writing 80-page papers about human rights abuses in Syria and whether universal jurisdictions are proper solutions. We're thinking about paid family leave systems and whether that would help make US families stronger and more productive, right? Well, you guys have tons of work on your plate, and yet you took time to plan this day so that we could be together like this. To do it virtually is really, really inspiring. And I am, you know, you are right. The sobering message is that while I'm not sure it's fair that we ask your generation to clean up the messes that previous generations have, I'm super encouraged by a lot of what I'm seeing. I like the activism. I think that social media can be a double-edged sword, right? We now have to really curate this information. We have to be really careful about what we're reading. We have to remember that facts and research really matters in informing the conclusions that we come to, but at the same time, look at the way that we are using these new tools to make sure that new voices are being heard. I'm very excited about the recent legislation out of the Senate in the United States, for example, for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, the ways in which we are affirming the importance of speaking out against racially based hate crimes and violence. I'm excited about these deep conversations about who in the United States is allowed to be here and how, right? So recent decisions, whether it is, for example, in the George Floyd case and others, but ways in which we can work together at the community level. I think I'm really encouraged. I'm encouraged. The Texas Tribune had a story about sort of mutual aid and ways in which we're thinking at a very community level, how to solve problems together. So in some ways, my theme lately is like back to the community, to the people around you, and maybe that'll be a refreshing moment. I'm also encouraged by progress being made both in industry as well as in governmental decisions around climate change. You know, we may be a little late to this, but I am hopeful that at least we can see some new energy and investment in renewables and in thinking about maybe some sort of new economic models that really take sustainability at its core. So those are the things I'm excited about. So I'm going to ask you, what are you hopeful about?
Yeah, I'm so happy you mentioned those economic models because that's exactly what my thesis is about, actually. So that honors thesis that you mentioned, which is something that I am trying to catch up on a little bit, but essentially I'm also studying circular economy models that work to essentially redesign the way we extract and dispose of our natural resources. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, but kind of like exactly what you said. First of all, community. I think I've really, especially right now, turned to my friends, really formed strong bonds with, my pod and stuff like that. We'll never forget this time of my life, obviously. And seeing things like even the kind of snowpocalypse, the snowstorm that happened earlier in February, I have never been so encouraged by seeing the community pull through, delivering food and water and helping each other out with, power and water shortages. I literally have just never seen the community come together like that in mutual aid. And it was really encouraging to see that there's still this like human caring, capability that we have to just care about our neighbors and know that we're like all in this together, regardless of, all sorts of identities or all sorts of affiliations. We're really in this together. And that is scaled up on the level when we think about climate change, I think. And that was something that I really dealt with, is this kind of like climate anxiety, because it felt really hopeless for a while. But I think halfway through college, I really pivoted to caring a lot more about climate change issues, which led to my thesis and my future job and stuff like that. I am really hopeful in not only, like you said, the government level and climate summits and treaties and all kinds of regulations and things like that, and innovations on a governmental level, but also, yeah, like you said, just activism on every level and changes on every level, and realizing what kind of scale of change is needed for us to have that kind of hope.
So I heard you say pivot. So I'm super interested in this, right? So in other words, what that might mean, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't come into college knowing exactly what you wanted to do.
Yeah, very true. I still don't know exactly what I want to do post-grad, but and hopefully that's encouraging for people to hear, but essentially I came in caring a lot about women's reproductive rights and menstrual hygiene in developing countries and international development kind of broadly. And like you said, I kind of changed my mind. I realized that there are issues that kind of affect everybody on a much broader scale. And I think that also leads into a question that we have from the chat in terms of how you can position yourself and how you can get involved. We have a question from Salome Scarmoni. Sorry, I'm so sorry. How would you recommend high schoolers can get involved in politics and advocacy? I really like that question. I think it is never too early to start, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, Dr. Holmsten.
Well, I was about to say, I'll pitch some ideas across the fence, but then you add in too, because you might know as well. So obviously how you spent your day today is brilliant, right? So, one of the things that you might not, well, so the way that I think about what you did today is, so you worked in teams, brilliant, right? You might have changed your mind, but you certainly listened to others. What a great skill. The other thing is you're building sympathy and empathy and understanding for other people. I think that is really important. I mean, as your story tells us, right? You were listening, you were paying attention, you were flexible, and so your interests pivoted a little bit. And so what I would encourage high school students to do is be present to what is going on. And that may be the news, yes, but may I also suggest that being present can also mean things like reading a novel, right? So I just finished Children of Blood and Bone. Brilliant book. Talk about, right? So this is sci-fi. This is sort of, I don't know fantasy exactly, but right, this is sort of a curious story, but it made me think about the way that society is organized, and again, systems of inclusion, right? This is a young adult fiction, right? So just even reading books so that you're sort of aware that other people experience this world differently than you do. May you always have somebody in your life who is different than you, so that you can kind of remember all of those things. So for me, certainly when I was to the point, to the question specifically, when I was hiring folks in DC, our feeling generally was that we could probably teach you a topic, right? You could learn up on a topic. The questions that we cared about were, how well could you work with other people? Were you curious and interested in the world around you? So think about, how do you spend your extra time? So it's not just the grades. I'm afraid they matter a little bit, but it's also, what did you do in your extra time? Did you head down to the community kitchen on the drag and help make your community a little bit better? Did you join the Audubon Society and think about the other creatures in your environment? Certainly your work with Model UN is brilliant. And so these are some of the things that I would recommend. What would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. And like you said, Model UN is a great place to start in terms of politics, advocacy, those skills. But like you said, I would also just, keep an eye out for all the sorts of opportunities that are there for students, and do not be afraid to reach out to ask, is there any way I can help? Is there any, role or position that is available? Is there just any way I can even come observe or something like that? People are oftentimes really willing to help, especially a student, learn new skills and new spaces, new topics. So really just don't hesitate. Most of the time I can almost say that you'll get a positive answer. But yeah, keep reading and keep, getting involved. Social media is a great place to connect with people. Start building kind of a network in a topic you're interested in, and kind of really getting deep into that, and notice places where, there might be a space to create something new, or, take that kind of initiative. And we also have a few more questions for you, Dr. Holmsten. We are getting a little close on time, but just a little bit more about UT and international relations in college. We have questions from Francesca and Yash. First of all, what makes UT a great place to study IR? And what is it like studying IR in college? So you can combine both of those a little bit into, what is it like studying studying IRG at UT?
Yes, well, again, let's double team this, because I'm sure you've got some good insights on this too. So, what I love about UT is, as a large institution, we've got folks thinking about these topics from so many different angles, right? And so just recently, the LBJ School opened a new program called the Women's Campaign School. So we've been in the government department studying women and the election of women. The social work program has been studying gender-based inequalities. The econ department, we've got folks in the area studies studying the impacts of particular regions on women. And then the LBJ school has this women's campaign school, right? So from all these public policy and government and sociology and social work, we can look at issues in a whole variety of different ways. Because UT is such a large institution, we've got just top scholars thinking about these questions from a variety of places. I think as a large institution as well, UT is very aware of itself. And so it tries to address any shortcomings with a lot of effort. So for example, ways in which we can help in the incoming students have a small cohort to work with, right? We're aware it's enormous. So let's make small cohorts, signature classes where students in their first year can be with just a handful of folks. This past summer, for example, UT spent a lot of time thinking about its racist past. We thought about statues. We instituted a land acknowledgement. Faculty, literally 2,000 faculty enrolled in a class over the summer on the history of the Black experience, taught by Dr. Leonard Moore. So once a week, we all got together and learned about this history and UT's role in that history. And so now many colleges in the university have dedicated staff to diversity and inclusion issues. And so I would say that as a large institution, maybe change is hard, and yet sometimes actually it can be really powerful. So I love being here both for the community and the way that I see people making decisions in such good ways, and then just the strength of that scholarship. What do you think? What do you like about being here?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a big question. That's incredible to hear about. I had no idea, but it really is inspiring and I think really important. And on that note of diversity, I think that is, first of all, UT's biggest strength is when I first came here as a freshman, the sheer diversity of the people I met and connected with was so powerful. And I felt like I was really like in this study of international relations just by meeting new people from, different backgrounds and different identities that I had never met before, especially international students. And UT is such a great destination for many international students as well, all kinds of exchanges abroad. So I think being that large, diverse institution is actually a really big strength of UT. A lot of people think, and I thought this too, I thought you had to be in DC to be able to study international relations. I thought you had to be in DC or New York, and otherwise you wouldn't get the benefits of studying IR, but that's absolutely not true. We have, first of all, the LBJ school, but just as like a large research university, there are so many classes you can take and a wealth of opportunities that you can get involved in terms of, cohorts, like you said, in a number of, scholarship programs or clubs or, study groups or all kinds of organizations that you can get involved in that I've had the pleasure of joining and learning so much from. So I think honestly, UT is really connected to this like network of large research universities that allow you to get really involved in the academic conversations that are happening and all the connections and networking. And like, it's just so exciting to be part of such a great institution that really cares about its students in terms of, that academic, and professional, acuity. And I really am thinking, fortunately that I've had the luck to be here for these past 4 years. And while my last year looked a little bit different, I'm really excited that I got to study IR here, and I'm really excited to, put that forward into the world. We are wrapping up on time. So I did want to say, if you have any last words, I wanted to say thank you so much, Dr. Holmsten, for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. We're really lucky to have you, and lucky to have you as a professor here and a supporter of Model UN. And yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I sure hope you guys feel really proud about what you have created. Again, I know the time and effort that goes into these sorts of things. And your answer to that question was really spot on. It made me remember things like the language investments of UT, funding for studying Portuguese or Turkish, or the study abroad programs and the regional area studies. I was really pleased to hear your description of it is such a diverse community, and what a pleasure to be a part of that. And you and other just amazing students are so inspiring, and really just such a pleasure. So thanks so much for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's watching. We will have a short break and then we'll get back into committee sessions. So be sure to keep an eye on your dashboards and your Discords and get back into your committee room. So thank you guys so much and have a good afternoon. And thank you again, Dr. Holmsten. I really appreciate you spending your time with us. If you have any questions about, me or Dr. Holmsten or and if you want to contact us, Dr. Holmsten's information is on the International Relations website. And I can be reached via the Instagram if you want to at TexasMUN. But thank you so much again and have a great afternoon. I really appreciate it. Bye.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.